a certain requirement. We grow up requiring that of those that we love. You have to be something for me to be loved, whatever that something is, employed. You have to have your status in the community. You have to be X, Y, or Z other than just what you are yourself in order for me to love you. And when you don't fulfill that, then I no longer love you. Now, this is different from setting healthy boundaries, which we all know, and where safety is involved, or where there's a limit where you say, I won't tolerate abuse. I'm talking about just where we have relationships that are coming in that are saying, you're not being the defense that I need you to be for me anymore. We were judged, and love was contingent on that judgment, and so therefore we learned to mix it. And as a result, many of our closest relationships get corrupted with that judgmentalism. And it becomes very difficult for us to maintain really fulfilling long-term relationships because we're not okay with ourselves, and therefore we're constantly judging the other person. We're looking through that lens, which is we know that we are fundamentally unlovable, and so we look through that same lens of judgment to the other person, and it makes it difficult to create fulfilling relationships. Love and judgment are married. Love is always contingent on you being lovable, and the world doesn't make sense unless they're good and bad people. Another deficit defense, fantasy. When I'm successful, I will no longer be shameful. Addicted to a fantasy. I remember several years ago working with a client who really, he had struggled on and off with shame and with depression as a result of it, and had done very well. He was a physician in a fairly successful practice, but that wasn't enough. There was always this need to be doing something more magical, something bigger than. So it wasn't okay just to be an ordinary physician with an ordinary practice. So he, at one point, joined Doctors Without Borders, which is a wonderful organization. Clearly, I think all of us would agree, contributing like that's important. But for him, it had this fantasy element. It was an escape to do this thing that was bigger and broader. And that worked for a little while. And then it didn't work anymore because, as you can imagine, Doctors Without Borders is a very difficult, tedious place to be. It didn't meet the fantasy. And so then there were the trips to Nepal, and then there was getting involved with a particular school of yoga and following the gurus of that around the world. And there was always this bigger than life escape kind of fantasy. I could never accept reality on reality's terms. When we see that defense, you can never be here and be now and be okay with it. It's always going to be something bigger, something better. The big win, and my ship will come in and idealize and then devalue. This bottom one's really important to point out, idealize and devalue. Because when they start using this defense, that almost always happens, because this is the new thing, this is great, this is going to be what makes me, this is going to make it all okay, this is going to be the big win that makes all the struggle worth it. And of course, it works for a little while, and then it doesn't work, and then they begin to devalue it because it never matches up to the fantasy in their head. It never gives them the relief that they're looking for because they don't have that core of self-validation. It never works. It starts to slide. And so they must devalue. So there's the new thing, the new person, the new teacher, the new whatever it might be, and then it starts to slide down. Living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, any of you that know Santa Fe, by the way, I lived in Santa Fe for about 10 years. Santa Fe has honest to God, it's got every guru on the planet has been there. Really. I mean, and some you've never heard of. And they're all doing, interesting, I've started to say bizarre, that's a little judgment, but wow, really? That's what you do? And people come. I'll say one, and some of you probably love this particular guru and you're not going to like me after I do this, but that's okay. There's one that all she does is hug. Yeah, that's all she does. She doesn't talk, she hugs. And people wait hours to be hugged, which is fascinating to me. Anyway. I saw this a lot with clients because the other thing about Santa Fe has a long history of being a playground of the wealthy, and oftentimes, actually many families on the East Coast their kids would be well off from trust funds and whatever else and end up in Santa Fe, and so they would kind of bounce from one guru to the next. And there was always this idealized, this is going to be nirvana, and then it doesn't happen, and then they would start to devalue it, be very disappointed, and then have to move on to the next guru. And then from there, they moved from Santa Fe to